Okay, so let's start for real, and then people will come in slowly as we speak. So a warm welcome to all of you. We have really looked forward to this launch of our new tool, the Human Rights and Environment Explorer. It is becoming increasingly clear that human rights cannot be realized without a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. And that momentum is what we are seeking to build on with this new tool that we are sharing with you today. The climate change crisis and the broader environmental crisis related to pollution, biodiversity loss, and depletion of natural resources constantly remind us of the need to step up and act. The UN General Assembly resolution in 2022 on the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment was an important step, and we have seen increasing attention to this as a human rights priority in recent years. From treaty bodies and UN mechanisms, and from national human rights institutions, from academics, from civil society organizations, including environmental organizations. With the database we launched today, we want to unpack for human rights actors why a healthy environment is key to the realization of human rights. We also want to offer access to exploring the authoritative interpretations from the UN system in that regard, and it is our hope that these legal arguments will be useful for human rights institutions and organizations who are seeking to step up their engagement in environmental matters. We hear more and more that human rights actors have that ambition, and we're keen to support that. We also want to enable broader use of human rights law in environmental matters, and it is our ambition to reach environmental actors and decision makers too with this tool. The defense of environmental sustainability is becoming more and more critical, as we all know, and human rights law offers new perspectives on that. Human rights law is legally binding, and the treaties we talk about are ratified by most states. So we are talking about arguments here that can influence policymaking, court decisions, and everything in between. With this, let us get started with our agenda. So the plan is to hear from Astrid Puentes Riaño, the UN Special Rapporteur on human rights to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. Astrid will tell us about the Special Rapporteur mandate and the development of the right to a healthy environment from the internal hallways of the UN, special procedures to international recognition from the Human Rights Council and from the General Assembly. After Astrid's keynote, we will hear from Megan Donnell, a researcher at DIHR. She will give us an introduction to the Explorer, and she will explain the thinking behind it and demonstrate how it works. At the end, we will have a Q&A session, and this is where you participants get to actually test the Explorer, try it out for yourselves on your own laptops, and we invite you to do that and to share comments and questions in the chat. We are unable to facilitate a spoken discussion given the number of people we have with us, but we are delighted to see questions coming up in the chat and to address them as they come. So I just need to check that we have Astrid with us. Are you with us, Astrid? Yes?
Hello,
excellent.
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. So we will hear the keynote now from Astrid Puentes Riaño, the UN Rapporteur, Special Rapporteur for the Human Rights to a Clean, Healthy and Sustainable Environment, and also the Director of the Environmental and Climate Justice Lab at the Berta Cáceres Environmental Justice Clinic at the Universidad Iberoamericana in Mexico. Astrid is also an advisor to various organizations and institutions, and she's the former co-executive director of the Inter-American Association for Environmental Defense, with broad academic experience, publishing of articles, and lecturing on environmental law. Astrid, it's a huge pleasure to have you with us. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. And it's also an honor for me to join you today.
There seems to be an issue with this. No, sorry.
let me know if you can hear me, and I see the first slide. So
We can. Sorry, it was me. We can hear you very well.
No worries, no worries. Yeah, sometimes Teams is difficult, but thank you very much for this invitation, Seal, and everyone at the Danish Center. It's really a pleasure to me to join you today and share a little bit of the mandate and especially, of course, in relation to the human rights to healthy environments. So if you can show the next one. The mandate, as you probably know, all the mandates are created by the Human Rights Council in Geneva. States create these mandates in order to help states in different human rights for us to advise them about how to better implement each of these rights. In my case, of course, is the human right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. This mandate was actually created in 2012 as an independent expert, and then in 2015 was moved to or changed to a special rapporteur. And it was created basically for 3 reasons, as you can see there, to study human rights obligations linking and in relation to the human right to a healthy environment, linking human rights and the environment. The second one is to identify and promote best practices that states and other actors can implement, and also to identify challenges and obstacles, and to help states and other institutions as well. That's one of the things that I'm doing to advance the right to a healthy environment. Next, please. So as rapporteurs, me and other mandate holders, we have the mandate to undertake country visits. Unfortunately, well, in general, is 2 country visits a year, but because of the liquidity crisis, unfortunately, we only last year and this year, we only are able to do 1. The photo that you're seeing here is a country visit that I did to Ireland a couple of weeks ago. And actually in this photo, I'm with my colleague. This is in Galway, and this is Siobhan Mulally, that is also the Special Rapporteur on Trafficking. We also can receive requests for communications in relation to situations that can be violating or threats to the human rights. What we do is, and one of the challenges in my case is capacity, because I receive dozens of requests for communications, but I have sent over 100 communications over these 2 years with other colleagues as well, that we call allegation letters in situations where there are violations or threats to violation of the human right to a healthy environment. We also do reports. We have 2 reports a year, one to the General Assembly. In my case, I present in October, and the other one to the Human Rights Council in Geneva that I present in March. I'm actually presenting this Friday in Geneva my report on clean air. And we also engage in advocacy, international negotiations. We can develop policy briefs. We present amicus and other ways in which we can, in different areas, help for the implementation of the right. Next, please. And this is only one of the examples of a report that we can do, and we help also the development of international law. This is the resolution on the ocean and human rights that the Council in Geneva approved last year. And a lot of the resolution on the ocean and human rights was based also on a report that I did last year on linking the ocean and human rights. And now, next, please. Thinking about, and I'm really aware of the time. So thinking about how the right to a healthy environment got recognized. So first, I want to share with you that this was a path of 50 years, a process that took 50 years at the UN in conversation. So as you can see there, the first time that the right to a healthy environment or language around that was mentioned at the UN was in 1972 during the Stockholm Declaration, that it was talked about the link and the importance of the environment for the enjoyment of human rights, specifically life. Then it was not included as such, but some reference was included. over the 70s, 80s, and 90s, the right to a healthy environment was incorporated in many constitutions around the world. Today, we actually, and I have to update that, today we actually have 166 constitutions or legislation recognizing the right to a healthy environment. And the first ones were in Portugal and many countries also in the Americas. Then in the 80s, the African and the Inter-American systems recognized expressly the right to a healthy environment. Then we saw also a reference in the Rio Declaration, the Arab Chart, then the ASEAN Declaration in 2012, that it was broadly around human rights, mentions the right to a healthy environment. And then finally, of course, going very quickly, but finally in 2021, the UN Human Rights Council recognized expressly with a resolution 4813, the right to a healthy environment. And that brought us to the General Assembly historical resolution in 2022 on the right to a healthy environment. So this is very briefly, and of course there's many decisions in courts around the declaration. But the final thing that I wanted to mention in this history is that, as we can see, there is 50 years also of discussion, analysis, recognitions. In the meantime, also, there's a lot of decisions in courts that helps us also understand what's the content of the human right to a healthy environment, that in some jurisdictions, because the recognition at the UN was 2022, can be seen as a new right. But it is not a new right, because in many jurisdictions, we've been working on it for decades. Next, please. So the content, it's a compound right, which makes this right very rich and sometimes difficult to understand. But basically, we are talking about procedural elements that are also human rights recognized independently: access to information, public participation, and access to justice. And we also have substantive elements that cover all the elements, or the intention is to cover all elements that are linked to the environment: clean air, safe climate, safe and sufficient water, healthy and sustainable food, non-toxic environment, healthy ecosystems, and biodiversity. And of course, as you can see, safe and sufficient water links to more the links to the basins, for example, the healthy of the ecosystems. And we also have, of course, a right to access to water. And these elements are interconnected and indivisible, also as human rights as well. Next, please. As we heard also recently, and I really want to highlight this because the ICJ advisory opinion on climate change on last July recognized very strongly that the right to a healthy environment is a precondition for the enjoyment of many other human rights. It is also linked to the interdependence. It's a result of the interdependence of human rights, and especially the ICJ mentioned the right to health, the right to life. And the ICJ concluded that states are required, the right to health environment is required to guarantee the effective enjoyment of other human rights, which is very important. And it was the most strongest recognition that we have so far. I would have loved the ICJ to recognize that the right to health environment is customary international law. That didn't happen, but one of the judges in their vote expressly also mentioned that it can be concluded that the right to healthy environment is today customary international law, and that's something that I also say, and I'm working on a policy brief to explain that. But even if it's not, we already have a very strong recognition, even from the ICJ, also, of course, from the Inter-American Court on Human Rights in the 2 advisory opinions and cases. And we're also in the process of hearing from the African Court on Human Rights in the next advisory opinion. Next, please. One of the reports that I have was the main challenges on the right to a healthy environment. I'm not going to go in detail because of time, but this is one of the main aspects that I'm working on to help states to address and overcome challenges, including that we need to stop and change this economic model that we have that is unsustainable, but also to identify how we can strengthen the rule of law and existing policies in order to advance the implementation of not only, of course, the right to a healthy environment and the right to a healthy environment linked with others. Next, please. So thinking about the work in this mandate, next, please. Sorry, there was the mandate and what is that I'm working on, the priorities. One of the key aspects of priorities that I have is to support the increased express recognition of the right to a healthy environment. There are some initiatives in the Pacific region, and of course we know, for example, that Vanuatu and other Pacific states have helped to in the whole process of the ICJ advisory opinion. There are also the states that have not recognized yet the right to healthy environment are considering how to do it. And they're also thinking about a regional instrument for the Pacific. And ASEAN recently adopted the declaration on the safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. They're doing a regional plan of action that I'm supporting. And also I'm working on mainstreaming the right to a healthy environment. I'm also working and supporting the recognition on the Council of Europe of the right to a healthy environment. And how in the next, next please. So the mandate is 6 years, and I already have been working for 2 years almost in May. So for the next 4 years, and I would love to also continue coordinating with many of you in this, because of course it's not only my mandate, but it's a coordination with a lot of people because to make sure that this is advancing. I'm planning the next report is on planning tools. There is a call for input open at the end of until the end of this month. I also would like to continue working on the implementation and recognition of the right. As you can see there, the next report for the council that I will be working on is on environmental human rights defenders, and specifically addressing how to advance the collective perspective and collective measures for the protection of environmental human rights defenders, and also strengthening the implementation of the obligations from states and businesses in relation to the right to a healthy environment, because that's one of the big challenges that we have. And with this, I want to thank you for this space. And congratulations for the tool also that will help in the implementation, of course, of the right. And I really hope that the reports of me, but also other mandate holders and other tools will be helpful in this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Astrid. A pleasure. Thanks a lot for walking us through your mandate, and not least for also sharing the rich history behind the recognition that we have now and the many years of work by many actors and in different regions. I always think it's reassuring when we work on human rights and we see a lot of challenges to also remind ourselves how what we have has evolved over years. So with this, we are ready now then to hand over to my colleague Megan Donald, who is a researcher here at DIHR on environment, climate change, and human rights. Megan has legal expertise in both environmental law and human rights law, and this is the expertise that we have used to develop this Human Rights and Environment Explorer. So over to you now, Megan, to introduce us to the new tool.
Great. Thank you, Sila. And I just want to share my screen quickly. Right. So I'm going to be giving you a short introduction to this tool. And after this, I'll talk about the scope of the Explorer, some of the limitations that we have, and what it includes and doesn't include, the content. I'll talk a little bit about the methodology, mention some of the filters that you can use when searching, and then I'll spend most of the time on an actual demonstration of the tool itself. So to start, the Explorer is an online database which is freely available and helps foreground environment-related human rights obligations. And it shows how these obligations correspond with the elements of the right to a healthy environment. So all of those elements that Astrid mentioned in her talk. And the Explorer also highlights contributions from UN treaty bodies that are often overlooked and have the potential to influence and inform regional and domestic law. So how can the Explorer be used? To start, it could be used to follow developments in the field of human rights and the environment and related to the right to a healthy environment, to quickly find authoritative interpretations of human rights in an environmental context, to understand the environmental dimensions of a particular human right, for example, everything related to the environment and the right to housing. And it can be used by government departments or other duty bearers to understand their environment-related human rights obligations. So a quick teaser of the website. We have two databases that you can search for. We have a treaties database and a case law database. I'll speak more about these when I get to the demonstration. There's also an introduction to the topic of human rights and the environment, and then information about the Explorer, how we developed it, and some of the methodology. And then lastly, we have the option of a Spanish translation. So the entire website is available in Spanish, and all the data in the databases is also available in Spanish. So turning to the scope of the Explorer, there are some limitations to the scope of the Explorer. Some of this is based on our own resources and capacity. But some of it is also based on trying to make sure that the end result is the most relevant and focused that it can be. So we didn't want to overwhelm the database with lots of results where if you as a user get too many, they're less manageable. So firstly, we focused on sources containing relevant text on human rights and the environment. So this means that we've excluded sources that are only relevant for the environment or only relevant for human rights. So if they have environmental language but don't refer to human rights, or if they talk about human rights but don't refer to the environment. So for example, the ICJ's recent advisory opinion on climate change has lots of content that talks about climate change and climate law, but we've only included those aspects of the judgment that specifically talk about human rights. And then just to mention, we currently don't have any environmental law sources in the scope of the tool. Of course, we recognize that there are sources that do refer to human rights, like the Paris Agreement mentions human rights in the preamble. We just haven't been able to include that at this stage. Then we've also emphasized sources that have greater legal weight. And this is to ensure that the results that you get help focus on highlighting the most legally binding obligations of states. So treaty body sources that we include are general comments or recommendations and decisions on individual complaints or communications. What we exclude is statements from treaty bodies as well as concluding observations. And then we've also focused on text that concerns the nature, scope, and content of relevant rights and obligations. So this means that we've excluded text that is merely descriptive. For example, text describing environmental impacts, the facts of climate change, without explaining the implications for relevant rights and state obligations. So we've tried to only include text that tells you something about the nature, scope, or content of an obligation, and not just about the impact of the environment on human rights. So the current version of the tool only includes international sources, We have a plan to add regional sources in future, and we have begun that process, but we have no current plan for any national or domestic sources. And then what about the text of human rights treaties themselves? So at the moment, we have secondary sources in the tool, and this is because there wasn't that much that was relevant, but we have made sure to refer to relevant articles from the original human rights treaties wherever they are relevant. Then, how did we select the sources? So documents have been included as sources wherever they contain certain relevant keywords. This helped us select the documents that would form part of the Explorer. We excluded sources where the keywords that we used were not used in an environmental context. So, for example, documents from the Committee Against Torture that refer to a climate of impunity would be flagged as something that mentions climate, and then we would review them and recognize, okay, these are not relevant. The same goes for references to environment in the context of a family environment and children's rights, or a school environment. In those cases, those sources wouldn't be included purely on that basis. This is just a quick snapshot of the keywords that we used, but I won't go through them all now. Then the data set. We have the treaties database. So this consists of the UN treaty body general comments and general recommendations. We reviewed all 190 of these, and 26 were selected to be included. In the case law database, we have UN treaty body decisions on communications and individual complaints. Here we reviewed hundreds of them, but we focused only on decisions on the merits. This is also just because of capacity and ensuring we have a manageable scope. So we didn't look at decisions on admissibility or other procedural matters. And we then have 11 decisions that we included there. And then we looked at the ICJ jurisprudence, the International Court of Justice. And there were about 100 cases that we reviewed. We looked at advisory opinions and decisions on the merits, and we just included one case. So quickly looking at our methodology, how did we go about this? So once we had these sources, we extracted relevant text that had some environmental content, and we split that text into paragraphs or sub-paragraphs into a manageable size, hopefully. And each one of these then becomes a single entry in the Explorer database. Each of these entries was then reviewed and tagged with relevant filter categories. And this then allows these to be filtered in the search based on how they've been tagged. So what filters did we use? We used elements of the right to a healthy environment, relevant rights, affected groups, topics, and region. And we don't, in the scope of today's launch, we don't have time to talk about all of these in detail. In the demonstration, I will show you these filters, but we do encourage you to go and look at our methodology if you have any questions about how we made certain decisions and when did we tag certain things or not. So I will now do a quick demonstration. So welcome to the website of our Human Rights and Environment Explorer. So you'll recognize these headings and this landing page from the snapshot I showed you earlier. If you scroll down here, you'll see the, sorry, I'm just checking how much time I have. You will see the Explorer search function, and you'll see here that you see the results from the treaties database and the case law database. And these are presented separately. And if you click on them, it'll take you to the actual results of each one. So under the elements of the right to a healthy environment, we have all of the elements that Astrid mentioned earlier, the substantive and procedural elements. And then we also have categories for a broad environment category where something doesn't fit with any of the other categories. And we have an additional category where the right to a healthy environment or some kind of environmental right is explicitly mentioned. Then we have relevant rights. So here we have all relevant civil and political rights, economic, social, and cultural rights. We also have categories of certain obligations. There's also a filter for relevant body. So if you only want to see results from the Human Rights Committee or one of the other bodies, you can select that. Region at the moment just says international because we haven't added any regional sources yet. Then we have affected groups that you can filter by, and then topics. And here we've just selected various topics that we think might be of interest to people. And particularly with the topics, I'd encourage you to go and look at the methodology to see what's included within the scope of each topic. So just to give you an example of a search, imagine that you are somebody who works with small-scale farmers and you're interested in issues concerning water pollution. You might go to the Right to a Healthy Environment elements and click on Safe and Sufficient Water, and then go to affected groups and look at peasants and people in rural areas, and then you can search. And then you'll see there's 12 results in the treaties database and 1 result in the case law database. So if we go to the treaties database, the first thing I want to say is it is possible after this to now further refine the search. So if you wanted to only see results from the Committee on the Rights of the Child, you could select it. But if you don't want to refine it, you can just scroll down. And firstly, you'll note that there's a download option here. So you can save your search and download it and use it however you like for research or for, whatever you need, and you can keep that data. And then just to show you the headings here, we've got Right to a Healthy Environment element. This shows you all of the elements that were tagged for this particular section of text. And it shows you the relevant rights that were tagged, the instrument and the article. If there's no specific article that's mentioned in this text, then we just say general. And then you can click on more here to see the full paragraph that we've included. And all of these sections have a clickable link at the top that will take you directly to the actual text of the original document. So if you want to see General Comment 27, you just click there and you can download. So you'll see here we've got some from General Comment 27 from the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, General Comment 26, 15, and you scroll down, then you have some general recommendations from CEDAW, a few of those, and then lastly we have one from the Committee on the Rights of the Child. So those are the results in the treaties database. Then you can go back in your browser and it will save your search that you've just done, and we can go to the case law results. Of course, you also have the option to open in a new tab if you'd prefer to have the treaties and case law open at the same time. And here we just have one result, a case from the Human Rights Committee, and you'll see that the way that it's presented here is slightly different to what we've done in the treaties database. Here we have a few paragraphs that are all related to each other, but before we have the quoted paragraphs from the text of the case, we have a commentary that we've included. So all the cases have an initial paragraph that just gives you a brief description of the issues that were discussed in the case and how we feel it's relevant for human rights and the environment. And as with the treaties database, you have a clickable link if you want to go and look directly and read the whole case yourself. And then, of course, we still have the columns with the Right to a Healthy Environment element and relevant rights. So that's one example of a search. I just want to show you one more thing on the search functions. So we can reset if we want to do a new search. Then I want to look at, imagine that you wanted to find some results on the green or just transition away from fossil fuels. In the topics and in the elements, we don't have a specific dedicated topic for that. So you could look at everything on a safe climate, and we've got 213 results there. Under topics, we have climate adaptation, climate finance, mitigation, and a few other climate-related topics, but nothing specifically on a just transition. And here's where we would recommend using the keyword search. And this will search the text of all of the results and give you everything that comes up. So if I search transition, then we've got 19 results in the treaties database. So if I go to those results, then I can see all of them here. Now, one other feature that I want to show you is you'll see for each of the individual ones, we've just got a few lines of text here, and you can click more to see the whole thing. If you click expand all, then all of them will be opened up. So now you can read through all of them in one go. But this is a big wall of text that can be tricky to manage and figure out. You have to read through them to see where they mention a just transition and why these particular ones have been selected. So here we recommend that you use your browser search. So if you search within your browser, so I use Control F or whatever the shorthand is on your device, then you can scroll through and see the highlights of where exactly this word is mentioned, and that can really help you to navigate the amount of text that you get delivered when you do a search like this. And so that's pretty much everything I wanted to show you. The final thing is just to point you again to the methodology. So this about the Human Rights and Environment Explorer tab takes you here, and there's some general information about the development of the Explorer. And if you scroll further down, you can get specific information on tagging the elements and examples of when we tagged certain elements and why. And then we've got the same thing for how we selected and tagged affected groups and topics and relevant rights. So if you have questions about that kind of thing, I encourage you to go and have a look there and see what we did and what our logic was in how we set it all up. And then the final thing I will mention before I hand back is at the bottom of every page, you'll see that we have this contact us section, and we have this email address, environment@humanrights.dk. So if you have any feedback, you're welcome to contact us there. And with that, I will hand back to Silla. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Megan, for taking us through the layers of the database. We will now share the link to the Explorer in the chat. And it's time for all of you, our participants here today, to go in and look and try it out for yourselves. And we are hoping to receive a lot of questions, maybe some comments in the chat. I will hand over to my colleague Maria to moderate this Q&A session. So welcome
Thanks,
to Explore.
Thank you, Silly. Thanks, and I hope you all now see the link. It's been posted in the chat again to the Human Rights and Environment Explorer, so feel free to click on that. We now welcome questions and feedback in the chat. And unfortunately, we won't be able to hear from you via your microphone, but please do use the chat function. And if you need a little bit of time to digest all of this, please do feel free to use the email address that Megan just showed. The email will then go to Megan and I, and we will be happy to respond to your questions. There was a question earlier in the chat about whether we are also including non-environmental rights, sort of other human rights. And I think Megan did actually address that in her presentation and showed that in fact we do have a wide range of human rights tagged. But of course, the content you'll see will be the environmental dimensions of that right has been fleshed out in the general comments of treaty bodies. There's a question about whether the tool could be useful for companies doing human rights due diligence. I think actually we do have a topic on due diligence and environmental impact assessment. I don't know, Megan, if you want to comment on that.
Yes, there are some topics that would definitely be useful. We also have business-related human rights obligations as a relevant rights category. So it would be possible to filter according to some of those, and certainly some of the topics that would be of interest could be filtered along with both. So if you select the business filter under the relevant rights and then select the topic that you're interested in, you'll see the business-related obligations. So yes.
Great. There's also a question about how we're planning to update the tool. And yes, we will be updating and keeping track of new developments. We're also, as Megan mentioned, hoping to add, or we're planning to add regional sources. It will take some time. We're starting with the advisory opinions from the Inter-American Court, because we know that there's a lot of relevant content there, but we hope to add from both the Inter-American system, the African system, the European system eventually. That is the plan. Then there is a question here about should we double check the international human rights instruments that are not included here. I don't know if there's some particular ones that you have in mind, but I don't know, Megan, if you want to speak to the scope of the instruments included.
Yeah, I mean, any general comments and decisions from UN treaty bodies would have been included. So we've searched through all of those. If there are other specific things you think that we've overlooked that are international human rights instruments that are missing, please let us know, and we're happy to take a look and see whether we should include those as well. Thanks.
Great. I also want to give a special thanks to some of our reviewers, because we did send out a link for a handful of people to take a sneak peek, and they were able to give us some useful feedback as well, including on the addition of regional sources to really also build up the case law database, because right now there's a limited number of cases in the database, but we hope to expand on that. It's really nice to see some comments that it is relevant and user friendly, so that is extremely good to hear. There's a question about what about special rapporteurs, and there, as Megan explained, we haven't included statements, for example, or reports by special rapporteurs, but we have included the general comments from treaty bodies, as they carry that legal weight and are the most sort of widely accepted interpretations of state obligations. Also simply to limit the scope, because it would become an enormous exercise if we were to further expand on the types of sources to be included. We will also be sharing the materials in an email and the recording with Spanish subtitles. Great. So great to see some of this feedback, and do feel free to send us specific questions via the email address. There is a question now on how soon the database scope will be expanded. We do hope to add some more content over the coming months, and we will be sending out updates when there are some significant updates, for example, on LinkedIn, where you can follow us. We'll be adding information about when sources are added. Over the course of this year, I'm afraid we can't set a specific date right now, but we are hoping in the next few months to add some content from the Inter-American system, at least on those advisory opinions. Great. The methodology in updating the database, how often will it be updated? The methodology is there, and I guess we will be updating it on an ongoing basis if there's a need to, but of course we will stick with the methodology that is now established and only update it if there's a need to. But for consistency, we'll stick with what we have set out and described in the methodology. And yes, we recognize that updating is central. Yes, please, Megan.
Yeah, perhaps just to add to that, that we aren't a very big team working on this, so we will update as much as we are able, but I mean we won't be able to update as soon as new developments happen, you know, in the days following. But we are intending to do our very best to update it as often as we can.
Indeed. I think with this, I'm going to be handing back to Sille for the closure and just inviting you to continue to share feedback also on how you're using the tool, and it will be extremely useful for us to hear. Megan, feel free to add a point.
Yes, I just saw another question that I wanted to respond to. Julia asked can everyone participate in the update or suggest cases for consideration? You're welcome to use that email address on the website, environment@humanrights.dk, and get in touch with us if you have suggestions of things that should be included. We will, of course, try and be consistent with our methodology and with the choices that we've made about the content. So we won't, include one or two cases from, for example, a national court if we haven't done that across the board. But we welcome any suggestions, and we, of course, recognize that there may be oversights and things that we've missed. So thank you.
Great. And if there are questions we haven't addressed, we are willing to do so via email. I see the questions are coming in. Thank you. Over to you, Celia.
Thank you. And time now then to wrap up this event. A warm thank you to all of you who have attended, and a particular warm thank you to Astrid Puentes, the Special Rapporteur, for being with us. And all the best also for your important work, Astrid, from our side. As we've said, we will share an email after this where we send the link in an email. We will share the recording from this launch. And we do encourage all of you to share this tool with colleagues, partners, stakeholders who could find it useful. I can see some people have already in the chat said that they will do exactly that, and we're very happy about that. So with this, I want to close and wish all of you a good night, a good afternoon, a good morning, wherever you are in the world. Thanks a lot for joining us. Bye-bye.